Have you ever noticed how some women move through life with an almost ethereal lightness, as if the burdens of existence simply cannot weigh them down? Perhaps you've encountered such a person at work, in your social circle, or even just passing by. Someone whose presence seems to emanate a profound sense of peace that feels almost inexplicably magnetic. You observe them from a distance, wondering what secret knowledge they possess that allows them to navigate life's complexities with such graceful ease. The contrast becomes even more stark when you reflect on your own inner turbulence, the countless moments spent overthinking decisions, ruminating on past mistakes, or anxiously anticipating future catastrophes. This disparity creates a peculiar discomfort, a cognitive dissonance that compels us to question the fundamental nature of our relationship with reality itself. Most people find themselves trapped in a perpetual cycle of seeking happiness in external circumstances while simultaneously feeling hollow inside, unable to articulate why material successes and social validation fail to deliver the promised peace. Immanuel Kant, despite writing in the 18th century, provided profound insights into this very modern predicament. Yet his ideas remain shrouded in intimidating terminology and abstract reasoning that creates a seemingly impenetrable barrier between his wisdom and its practical application in our daily lives. The feeling of inadequacy that surfaces when we attempt to extract meaningful guidance from philosophical texts often leads us to abandon the pursuit altogether. Returning to the superficial solutions offered by contemporary culture that inevitably leave us feeling empty and disconnected. But what if I told you that by the end of this exploration, you would possess a clear understanding of the Kantian principles that underlie true inner peace, the same principles that these serene women have intuitively discovered? The insights I'm about to share will not merely expand your intellectual understanding of Kant's philosophy, but fundamentally transform how you perceive yourself in relation to the world around you. These concepts, once genuinely comprehended, cannot help but alter your decision-making processes and reorient your approach to life's challenges. There is a certain urgency to this understanding, as each day lived without this awareness represents another day spent in unnecessary inner conflict and disconnection from your authentic self. So let us begin this journey together, a journey toward understanding how Kant's revolutionary ideas about autonomy, duty, and the nature of reality itself can illuminate the path to that elusive inner peace that some seem to have already discovered. When we observe women who seem to possess an inherent lightness of being, what we're witnessing is not merely a personality trait or fortunate circumstance, but rather the embodiment of what Kant would call moral autonomy, a state of self-governance that arises from a profound understanding of one's relationship to universal principles. Kant was born in 1724 in Königsberg, Prussia, a city he rarely left throughout his 79 years of life. Despite his seemingly uneventful external existence, his mind traveled to the furthest reaches of human understanding, restructuring our comprehension of reality itself. His life reminds us that true transformation occurs not through accumulating diverse external experiences, but through deepening our relationship with the fundamental structures of thought and action. These women we admire have intuitively grasped what Kant articulated through rigorous philosophical inquiry, that peace comes not from controlling outcomes in the external world, but from establishing harmony between our will and universal moral law. The categorical imperative, Kant's central ethical concept, instructs us to act only according to that maxim, whereby we can, at the same time, will that it should become a universal law. This may sound abstract, but observe how those women who radiate peace approach decisions. They seem to operate from principles rather than mere preferences, considering not just what they want in the moment, but what their actions represent in a larger context. They have transcended the tyranny of personal desire and social expectation, accessing a realm of freedom that most of us can barely imagine. The heaviness most of us carry through life stems from what Kant would identify as heteronomy, allowing our will to be determined by forces external to our rational nature. Think about the last time you felt truly burdened. Perhaps you were making a decision based on what others might think or pursuing a goal. Society deemed valuable despite your own misgivings, or caught in the grip of an emotional reaction that felt beyond your control. In each case, something other than your autonomous rational will was determining your actions. The women who have discovered inner peace have learned, either through deliberate practice or intuitive wisdom, to identify when they are acting heteronomously and redirect themselves toward authentic moral autonomy. This is not about callous indifference to others or a self-centered pursuit of personal preference. Quite the opposite. Kant's conception of autonomy demands that we recognize our participation in what he called the kingdom of ends, a community of rational beings who must never be treated merely as means to our own satisfaction. The lightness these women embody comes precisely from their liberation from the exhausting calculations of self-interest and social positioning, allowing them to relate to others with genuine presence and respect rather than strategic manipulation. I want to pause here and ask you directly, how many times have you felt the heaviness of trying to control outcomes that are fundamentally beyond your control? That sensation of carrying the weight of potential futures, of other people's judgments, of your own insatiable desires? You're not alone in this struggle. Many of us walk through life accumulating this invisible burden, never realizing that what Kant called the pathological motivations, those driven by inclination rather than duty, are precisely what keep us tethered to a state of inner conflict. I would love for you to share your experience in the comments section below. Perhaps something as simple as, "My heaviest burden is Zyg's." Your comment not only helps me create content more aligned with your actual needs, but also creates a community where others facing similar challenges can feel understood and less isolated in their philosophical journey. Through this sincere exchange, we grow together toward greater understanding. So please, take a moment to pause the video and share your experience. Your voice matters more than you might realize in this collective exploration of Kantian wisdom. The distinction between phenomena and noumena lies at the heart of Kantian metaphysics and provides profound insight into why some women appear to have mastered the art of inner peace. Kant proposed that what we perceive with our senses, the phenomenal world, represents only appearances, while the things in themselves, the noumenal realm, remain forever beyond our direct access. This distinction may seem purely academic until we recognize its revolutionary implications for our emotional lives. The women who embody inner peace have internalized this distinction, recognizing that most of our suffering comes from conflating these two realms, from mistaking our interpretations of reality for reality itself. Consider how often your distress arises not from events themselves, but from the meanings you attribute to them. A neutral comment becomes an insult. A normal delay becomes a catastrophe. An ordinary challenge becomes evidence of personal inadequacy. Women who have discovered inner peace have trained themselves to maintain awareness of this gap between phenomenon and reality, creating space for conscious response rather than automatic reaction. They exhibit what Kant might call transcendental freedom, the capacity to initiate causal chains independent of the natural determinism that governs the phenomenal world. This doesn't mean they don't experience difficulty or emotion. Rather, they've discovered how to remain grounded in their noumenal capacity for choice, even amidst the swirling phenomena of circumstance and feeling. Kant's concept of the sublime offers another window into the serenity we observe in certain women. The sublime, for Kant, describes our encounter with that which exceeds our conceptual grasp or sensory comprehension. Vast mountains, stormy seas, the infinite expanse of the night sky. These encounters initially overwhelm us, making us feel small and powerless, but ultimately awaken us to our transcendental nature that can think beyond the limits of sensory experience. Women who have discovered inner peace have learned to approach life's challenges as encounters with the sublime, moments that may initially overwhelm but ultimately reveal our capacity for transcendence. They don't shrink from difficulty or seek constant comfort. Instead, they welcome the opportunity for growth that comes from confronting that which exceeds our immediate understanding. This approach transforms potential sources of anxiety into catalysts for expansion, replacing the contracted heaviness of resistance with the spacious lightness of acceptance and integration. Notice how such women respond to unexpected changes or apparent setbacks, not with rigid opposition or catastrophizing, but with a fluid adaptability that acknowledges the limitation of their control while affirming their freedom to choose a response. The practical implementation of Kantian principles in daily life requires what he called moral feeling, an emotional attunement to the moral law that allows us to recognize and be motivated by its demands. This is not about suppressing emotion in favor of cold rationality, as Kant is often misunderstood to advocate. Rather, it involves cultivating emotions that align with and support our rational recognition of moral imperatives. Women who embody inner peace have developed this moral feeling to a remarkable degree, allowing them to act from principle without internal conflict. They experience positive emotions not as the goal of their actions, but as the natural accompaniment to acting in accordance with universal law. This alignment between emotion and duty creates the seamless integrity we perceive as lightness of being. Consider how differently you feel when acting from external pressure versus acting from deeply held principle. The former creates internal friction that manifests as tension and heaviness, while the latter generates a sense of congruence experienced as ease and flow. The peace these women emanate isn't achieved through emotional suppression or denial of desire, but through the harmonization of their sensible nature with their rational will. Kant's critique of happiness as the basis of morality offers yet another perspective on the lightness these women embody. He argued that making happiness our primary aim inevitably leads to disappointment, as happiness depends on external circumstances beyond our control and constantly shifts in its requirements. The pursuit of happiness as traditionally conceived, maximizing pleasure and minimizing pain, creates a perpetual restlessness, as we're constantly evaluating our current state against imagined alternatives. Women who have discovered inner peace have shifted their focus from the pursuit of happiness to the pursuit of worthiness to be happy, what Kant called the highest good. This subtle but profound reorientation liberates them from the exhausting treadmill of hedonic adaptation, where each attained pleasure quickly loses its satisfaction and demands replacement. Instead, they derive lasting fulfillment from living in accordance with moral principles, experiencing what Kant called self-contentment, a satisfaction that comes not from sensory pleasure, but from the consciousness of virtue. This contentment manifests as the serene presence we find so magnetic and mysterious in these women. The role of aesthetic experience in cultivating inner peace, though less prominent in Kant's moral philosophy, emerges in his critique of judgment and offers valuable insight into the practices that support moral development. Kant suggested that beauty provides a sensible analog to moral goodness. Both involve finding universality within particularity. Both please without serving any external purpose. Both engage our faculties in free play rather than rigid determination. Women who have mastered inner peace often demonstrate a heightened aesthetic sensitivity, not in the sense of superficial attention to appearance, but in their capacity to perceive harmony, proportion, and meaning in everyday experience. They approach life itself as an aesthetic phenomenon, bringing the same qualities of attentive appreciation to ordinary moments that we might bring to a work of art. This aesthetic orientation cultivates the disinterested attention that supports moral perception, allowing them to see situations clearly without immediately filtering them through the lens of personal advantage. The contemplative quality we observe in these women reflects this aesthetic engagement with life, a capacity to be fully present to what is without immediately imposing utilitarian demands upon it. Kant's notion of radical evil, the innate human tendency to subordinate moral law to self-interest, helps explain why this inner peace remains elusive for so many despite its apparent simplicity. We are predisposed, Kant argued, not to reject moral principles entirely, but to make exceptions for ourselves, to invert the proper order of motivations by placing self-love above duty. Women who have discovered inner peace have confronted this tendency in themselves through rigorous self-examination, developing the moral courage to acknowledge when they are rationalizing self-interested choices rather than acting from universal principle. This unflinching self-awareness distinguishes them from those who merely present a peaceful facade while internally justifying actions that contradict their professed values. True inner peace cannot coexist with self-deception. It requires the integrity that comes from honest recognition of our moral failings, coupled with the commitment to continuous self-improvement. The lightness these women embody stems not from moral perfection, but from freedom, from the exhausting mental contortions of self-justification and the energy-draining compartmentalization of contradictory values. The social dimension of Kant's moral philosophy illuminates another aspect of the inner peace we observe in certain women. For Kant, morality is inherently communal. We act as members of a kingdom of ends, where each rational being has absolute value and deserves respect. Women who embody inner peace have internalized this perspective, approaching social interactions not as opportunities for competitive advantage or validation seeking, but as contexts for mutual recognition and support of rational agency. They treat others not as means to their own ends, but always as ends in themselves, worthy of dignity regardless of utility. This orientation liberates them from the exhausting calculations of social positioning and impression management that consume so much mental and emotional energy for most of us. They have discovered that treating others with genuine respect generates a reciprocal field of dignity that supports everyone's autonomy, creating social environments characterized by trust and authenticity rather than manipulation and defensiveness. The peace they emanate in social situations stems from this fundamental security in their moral relationship with others. The practice of self-legislation, giving the moral law to oneself rather than receiving it from external authority, stands at the center of Kant's conception of autonomy and provides the key to understanding the independence that characterizes women who have discovered inner peace. These women do not derive their principles from social convention, religious doctrine, or even natural inclination, though these may align with their self-determined moral law. Instead, they engage in the demanding work of determining through reason what principles could serve as universal law, then commit themselves to these principles not from external compulsion, but from rational self-determination. This self-legislation generates a profound sense of ownership over one's moral choices that manifests as the quiet confidence we associate with inner peace. When we act from externally imposed rules, even when we agree with them, we experience a subtle alienation from our actions that creates internal division. Women who radiate serenity have healed this division by fully claiming their moral agency, experiencing their principled actions as authentic expressions of their deepest selves, rather than compliance with external demands. The concept of duty in Kant's moral philosophy is often misunderstood as cold obligation devoid of emotional fulfillment. But properly understood, it reveals the surprising source of joy we observe in women who have mastered inner peace. For Kant, duty is not opposed to inclination, but represents the appropriate ordering of motivations. We act from duty when moral principle takes precedence over self-interest, even when both point in the same direction. Women who embody inner peace have discovered that acting from duty, in this sense, generates a unique form of satisfaction unavailable to those who act primarily from inclination. This satisfaction comes from exercising our distinctively human capacity for moral self-determination, affirming our transcendence of mere natural causality. The joy these women exhibit stems not from the pleasurable consequences of their actions, but from the intrinsic value of acting in accordance with universal law. This orientation toward duty liberates them from the tyranny of outcomes, since the moral worth of an action lies in its motivation rather than its results. They remain centered even when their efforts fail to produce the desired effects. The lightness they embody reflects this freedom from the burden of controlling circumstances, allowing them to invest fully in their actions while maintaining emotional equanimity regardless of results. If you've found clarity in these explorations of Kantian philosophy and its relationship to inner peace, I invite you to become part of our growing community of philosophical seekers. The path to understanding Kant and applying his insights to your life need not be lonely or confusing. Subscribe to this channel and join others who, like yourself, are searching for clarity amidst the fragmented information about philosophy that pervades our culture. By subscribing, you'll receive weekly reflections that transform seemingly inaccessible concepts into practical insights for your life. We're not merely studying philosophy here. We're learning to think with greater depth, question with greater wisdom, and live with greater purpose. Click the subscription button now, not as an obligation, but as a gift to your own intellectual development. And if this content has brought some clarity to you today, leave your like as a way of saying, "We're in this quest for true knowledge together." Remember, understanding Kant isn't merely an academic exercise. It's a way of awakening to a more conscious and authentic existence, particularly in how we approach inner peace and the lightness of being that some women have so powerfully demonstrated. The practice of moral discipline, systematically bringing our sensible nature into alignment with our rational will, provides concrete guidance for those seeking to develop the inner peace we admire in certain women. Kant recognized that our natural inclinations often conflict with moral demands, creating the internal tension we experience as heaviness and discord. Women who have mastered inner peace engage in regular practices that strengthen their capacity to act from principle, even when inclination pulls in other directions. They approach this discipline not as harsh self-denial, but as cultivation of their highest nature, similar to how an artist develops technical skill in service of creative expression. These practices might include regular self-examination, where they honestly assess the motives behind their actions, deliberate exposure to challenging situations that develop moral strength, or contemplative practices that create space between impulse and action, allowing rational reflection to guide response. The serene presence these women embody reflects years of this intentional alignment, where initially effortful moral choice gradually becomes second nature, allowing them to act with integrity even in situations where others become reactive or compromised. Kant's distinction between price and dignity offers profound insight into why women who have discovered inner peace remain unshaken by the social comparisons that burden so many of us. According to Kant, everything in the realm of means has a price and can be exchanged for something of equivalent value, while that which constitutes an end in itself possesses dignity beyond all price. Women who embody inner peace have internalized this distinction, recognizing their intrinsic worth as rational beings capable of moral agency. This awareness liberates them from the exhausting pursuit of external validation that characterizes contemporary social life, where worth is constantly being measured through accomplishments, possessions, appearance, or social media metrics. They understand that while their skills, attributes, and circumstances may have relative value in the marketplace of social exchange, their core dignity remains absolute and unaffected by comparison. This stable sense of intrinsic worth manifests as the unshakable confidence we perceive in these women, not arrogance based on superior attributes, but the quiet certainty that comes from recognizing one's inalienable dignity as a moral agent. The temporality of moral development in Kant's philosophy helps explain both the rarity of true inner peace and the path toward its achievement. Kant viewed moral progress as asymptotic, always approaching but never fully reaching perfect virtue. This perspective counters the impatience that leads many to abandon the pursuit of inner peace when quick results aren't forthcoming or when they experience moral setbacks. Women who radiate serenity have embraced this long view of moral development, committing to the ongoing work of aligning their will with universal law without expecting immediate perfection. They approach moral growth not as a finite project, but as the defining task of human existence, requiring patient persistence throughout life. This temporal orientation liberates them from the discouragement that comes from measuring progress against an ideal end state, allowing them to find fulfillment in the process of moral development itself. The lightness we observe in these women stems partly from this release from the burden of moral perfectionism, as they balance unwavering commitment to principle with compassionate acceptance of their continuing moral growth. The concept of the kingdom of ends in Kant's moral philosophy illuminates the communal dimension of inner peace that we observe in women who have mastered this art. Kant envisioned an ideal community where each rational being legislates universal law while simultaneously being subject to it, creating a system of mutually supporting moral agency. Women who embody inner peace actively contribute to this ideal in their interactions, creating around themselves a field of mutual respect that supports others' moral development. They recognize that individual peace cannot be sustained in isolation, but requires participation in a moral community where each person's dignity is affirmed. This orientation toward fostering moral community manifests in their approach to conflict. They address disagreement by appealing to shared principles rather than power dynamics, seeking resolutions that affirm everyone's rational agency rather than mere compromise between competing interests. The peace these women radiate extends beyond personal serenity to encompass their social environment, as they consistently act from the vision of a moral world where universal law harmonizes individual wills without suppressing their particularity. As we conclude this exploration of Kantian principles and their manifestation in women who have discovered inner peace, we return to the fundamental insight that transformed Kant's own understanding: the recognition that freedom comes not from liberation from moral law, but from self-legislation within it. The lightness we admire in these women stems from their discovery that true autonomy means giving the moral law to oneself, finding within one's own rational nature the source of universal principles. This discovery transforms the experience of moral demands from external constraint to authentic self-expression, creating the integration we perceive as inner peace. The path to this peace lies not in seeking special knowledge or extraordinary experiences, but in the patient cultivation of moral awareness and the courage to act from principle even when inclination or social pressure pulls in other directions. As you continue your own journey toward inner peace, remember that the women you admire have not achieved a static state of perfection, but are engaged in the same ongoing process of moral development that is available to all rational beings. The lightness they embody represents not freedom from moral demand, but freedom within it. The discovery that acting from universal principle creates harmony between our sensible and rational nature, resolving the inner conflict that manifests as heaviness and discord. This is the secret they have discovered, that peace comes not from controlling external circumstances or satisfying every desire, but from establishing internal integrity through alignment with the moral law we give to ourselves.